In the wee hours of the night, when everyone else is fast asleep, you're the one on third shift, burning the midnight oil. When a part fails and everything comes to a grinding halt, regardless of what the clock on the wall says, you leap into action. Grainger is with you and all the ones who get it done. With 24/7 customer support by phone or click to chat. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Drew and Jonathan Scott here to tell you that American Family Insurance wants to protect your dreams. So whether you're at home singing in the shower,
every note,
or prefer singing your heart out in the car like Drew,
cruising,
you can save up to 23% when you bundle your home and auto insurance with American Family Insurance. Get a quote or find an agent at amfam.com. Insure carefully, dream fearlessly.
Visit amfam.com to learn how discounts may apply to you. American Family Mutual Insurance Company, SI, and its operating company, 6000 American Parkway, Madison, Wisconsin.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
Hit my music!
Break it down!
Oh, you didn't know? Stand back!
I'm a nice man! Mamacita!
Do you smell what The Rock is cooking?
Eat me!
You're listening to Music of the Mat on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to Music of the Mat, the podcast devoted exclusively to the music of pro wrestling. It's all part of the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. I am your host, Andrew Rich. This is episode 143, and let's talk a little bit about the music of No Mercy, shall we? And I'm not referring to the music of the pay-per-views No Mercy. I'm not referring to the music of the Pro Wrestling Noah stable No Mercy. No, I'm referring to the late 2000 video game No Mercy for the N64. Part of a collection of wrestling video games made by the AKI Corporation in the late 90s for the N64 console. There was WCW versus NWO World Tour. There was the follow-up to that, which was WCW NWO Revenge. There was WWF WrestleMania 2000, and then the follow-up to that, which was WWF No Mercy. And then you had Virtual Pro Wrestling 1 and 2, which focused a lot more on the Japanese promotion side of things. And all of those games are some of the most highly acclaimed wrestling games of all time. And they did pretty well commercially, too. I believe Revenge, when it came out, was the highest-selling third-party Nintendo game ever, which is pretty damn impressive, I'd say. And it tells you, A, just how popular wrestling was at the time, and B, how popular these games are. I mean, to this day, you still have people comparing current wrestling games to the likes of No Mercy or Revenge or whatever. Now, I bring up No Mercy and the AKI games in general because recently, AEW unveiled new footage of its upcoming first console game, Fight Forever. And this game has been hotly anticipated since the very beginning of the company, really. I mean, for the past, 3.5 years, the question's been, when's the game coming out? When's the game coming out? And it's coming out. Not now, of course, in a few more months, but the game is fast approaching. And a lot of the hype and a lot of the talk surrounding the game is people comparing it to No Mercy. And people wanting it to be a throwback to the days of No Mercy and the other AKI games. Not the graphics, mind you. I think the graphics will be much better than those games. But gameplay-wise, a throwback to those games in particular. And in fact, one of the first announcements about Fight Forever was that they had brought in the director of No Mercy for this game in some capacity. And that got people very excited because games like No Mercy and WrestleMania 2000 and Revenge, they hold a very special place in people's hearts. Now, for me personally, look, you guys know the score here by now. My wrestling fandom began in 2003. So I never played No Mercy when it came out, or Revenge. I did have an N64, though. We did have that in the household. But we played Super Mario 64. We had 1080 snowboarding. We had GoldenEye, those kind of games. but never a wrestling game. My first wrestling game was for the GameCube, WrestleMania 18. And then I would get, WrestleMania 19, Day of Reckoning, those games. And then I would get a PS2 and get Here Comes the Pain and that SmackDown vs. Raw lineage of games and so on. So that's when I started becoming a wrestling fan and playing those wrestling games. So I missed out on No Mercy. I missed out on WrestleMania 2000 and the whole AKI boom. Although, funny enough, I did play an AKI wrestling game for the GameCube, but it was the hip-hop wrestling game Def Jam Vendetta, which is a pretty good game, I should say. It has the same engine as the older games, but yeah, playing as Nori and DMX and those kind of guys, it's a bit different than playing as, Chris Jericho and Kurt Angle or whatever. So, now that said, I still ended up playing those earlier AKI games because there was a time back in the day when I was a young whippersnapper where I got into emulators, playing old console games on my computer. And of course, being a massive wrestling nerd, those games included Revenge and No Mercy and Mania 2000. And, playing those games on the computer, it's not the same. There's a keyboard instead of a controller, and my computer monitor wasn't as big as my TV. I don't want to come off as like David Lynch complaining about people watching movies on their phones, but, it wasn't the same as playing it on a console with a big TV, So, as a result, I don't have the deep, deep love for games like No Mercy or Revenge that people who played them when they came out do. Both because I played it via emulator, but also because, at that point, I was used to my wrestling games having good graphics and good gameplay. I was used to games like Here Comes the Pain and Day of Reckoning, so going back and playing No Mercy and playing Revenge, it doesn't fill me with the same sense of wonder as someone would have in 98 or 99, where they would go from, the early to mid-90s games, where it's very arcade style and very cartoonish, to, say, the Acclaim games, Warzone and Attitude, where you had 3D graphics, but the gameplay sucked. And trust me, I know that because I emulated those games too, and they sucked to play. But now you've got No Mercy, now you've got Revenge, and World Tour, and WrestleMania 2000. You have these games where you do have 3D graphics, and the gameplay is amazing. The AKI collection was a major leap forward for wrestling games, and that's why you have people to this day who are so devoted to those games, and to this day they modify them as well. I mean, No Mercy has had a ton of mods to it over the years with, different rosters, different moves, like, coded into the game. It's crazy. I played a few of them myself, actually. There was a TNA versus ROH one, there was an ECW one, a modern WWE one. So yeah, just so much care and love and devotion are still being given to these games by the fans after all these years, which is why in 2022 you still have a lot of people hoping that Fight Forever is like No Mercy. And I hope so too, because No Mercy is a great game. Hopefully the graphics are better. I will say that, because those late 90s AKI graphics are a bit dated at this point. When you have, basically flat, smushed JPEGs of people's faces stapled onto models, that's not very ideal for this day and age. But again, look, late 90s, N64, we can forgive them. I think. But anyway, let's get to the music of No Mercy. And I'm not going to do a big deep dive on all the songs, just give some overall pity thoughts on the music. And, much like with the graphics, video game music has come a long way. Back in the day of early games, they didn't have a lot of room or technical capabilities to have big to-do soundtracks. But as time went on, and games got bigger, and technology advanced, they were allowed to, have a big orchestra, have a big bunch of musicians come in and make a full-fledged soundtrack, and it would sound amazing. As for No Mercy, it came out in 2000 for the N64. And like a lot of games that came out around that time, the music is very distinct, but it's not that complex in construction. You look at, The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, one of the most universally beloved and influential games ever, with one of the most universally beloved and influential scores ever, and you hear that main theme. That is not a full-blown orchestra. That's just a guy on a keyboard. Same with, like, Super Mario 64. I could rattle off the music in that game back to front. Dire Dire Docks is one of the most calming, beautiful songs I've ever heard. Again, it's just a guy on a keyboard. And yet, as simple as these songs are compared to today's games, they have endured for decades. They are legendary, legendary songs. Now, the question is, who did the music for No Mercy? Well, I'll tell you this. It wasn't Jim Johnston. It wasn't him. The music director is credited as Ben Freedom. All caps, 2 exclamation points. And music composer and converter is Koji Niikura. And they were also involved in making the music for WrestleMania 2000 and Revenge. Someone else did World Tour. And of the 3, Mania, Revenge, and No Mercy, I prefer the music of No Mercy the most. Not to say that the other games don't have their moments, like the Mania 2000 edit mode music. That's a catchy little tune right there. But to me, Mania 2000, it's a little bit too dingy and industrial for my liking. It's too much of that stuff to me. And there is that kind of sound in No Mercy as well, but I think overall the music of No Mercy takes a little bit of a different path, and that's evident from the intro music.
WWF.
The intro song really spells out what a lot of the music in the game is going to be, which is much more of a funk, hip-hop take on things. You know, the bass line, the percussion, some record scratches here and there, of course. It's very different than the WrestleMania 2000 music in terms of that kind of tone. But also, it spices things up with various vocal samples and audio samples dropped into the mix. He kicked out, he kicked out, he kicked out. If you smell Socko, The Rock says, etc., etc. So it livens things up in that aspect as well. It's not just music, it's music and also some fun clips of wrestling personalities. And that whole funky hip-hop mood mixed with the clips, that will give birth to arguably the game's most famous piece of music, which is music from the exhibition menu.
Diggity, diggity dog. Breaking. Diggity, diggity dog. Breaking. Diggity, diggity dog. Breaking. Diggity, diggity dog.
The actual funk music is fine, but when you add in diggity dog, Socko, break it, that puts it over the top, makes it like super fun and memorable. And if you remember, when we did the first episode of Music and Memories with Rich Craich, he picked this song as one of his choices. And just seeing how much of an earworm this sucker is, I could see why. It's very obvious. I do wonder, though, what was the thought process behind diggity dog? I do wonder where that came from. Just one of life's mysteries, I suppose. But anyway, that trend of the vocal samplings there, it's not in every aspect of the game. It's sort of confined to much of the menu music, like the championship mode, for example.
It's cooking. It's cooking. It's cooking. It's cooking. Know your role. It's cooking. It's cooking. It's cooking.
Or the SmackDown Mall edit mode music.
It's cooking.
I will say this is a very grunty soundtrack at times. Ugh! Also, speaking of SmackDown Mall, I want to give a shout out to the Attitude Era podcast. On their Patreon, one of their series they do for that is called SmackDown Crawl, where they review every episode of SmackDown from the beginning. And the music they use for the intro and outro of those episodes is the music from the SmackDown Mall shop. It reminds me of, like, organ music from a sports arena. Dun, 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 dun. But it's funny, they've done, like, 92 episodes of that show. At this point, I associate that song more with the podcast than I do with the game. It is what it is, I guess. But it's funny, you know, even though I haven't played the game all that much, and I haven't played it in quite some time, perusing through YouTube, perusing through the menu music specifically, when I play a track, it comes back to me immediately. Oh, that's the exhibition menu music. Oh, that's the option menu music. That's this and that. It just kind of springs back to me right away, which just goes to show you that, again, you don't need a fancy schmancy setup to make memorable music. You just need, you know, diggity dog and some funky beats. That's all you need, really. But before we move on here, let me just say that this episode of Music of the Mat is brought to you by HelloFresh. With HelloFresh, you get farm-fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. I know with the recent inflation going on that we're all looking for ways to save some money. In fact, HelloFresh can help you do that. It's 25% less expensive than takeout and even cheaper than grocery shopping too. So it's very money smart there. And there's always something new on the menu. From family-friendly to fit and wholesome, or even veggie recipes, there's something to please everyone this upcoming fall season. And as I've said many times before on the show here, I am not an expert in the kitchen, but HelloFresh helps me out immensely. I have all the ingredients right there, the recipes are simple to follow, and the prep work and cleanup time is low. So if you're like me, you want to make some nice meals all by yourself, go to HelloFresh.com/VOW16 and use the code VOW16 for up to 16 free meals across 7 boxes and 3 free gifts. Once again, HelloFresh.com/VOW16. That's the number 16. Use the code VOW16 and get up to 16 free meals across 7 boxes and 3 free gifts. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. Moving on to the background music during the wrestling matches part of the game. I don't have as much of a strong connection to that as I do the menu music. And I don't know if people are the same way about that, but to me it just doesn't have that kind of instant, oh yes, that song, I know that song, as the menu music does. And part of that is, of course, the menu music has the sound bites in there, and that's going to make them more memorable. But I will say, the in-game match music, they do make some interesting choices, I think. You do have your aggressive, high-energy, high-intensity wrestling fight music, of course. You can definitely hear the WrestleMania 2000-ness in those with the parts. But there are other times where it's a bit more laid back and a little bit more groovy, but it still has this kind of menace to it. It still has this kind of malevolence to the whole thing. And then there's like a tribal dance song for some reason. So yeah, some interesting choices there for background music, beyond just the standard, let's beat 'em up aggression music,
You spend the first hour of your vacation at the luggage carousel thinking there's nowhere to go but up. But there is a place to go but up, because when you open your suitcase you find it filled with dolls. Dolls like the ones in that movie that scared you so much you wet your girlfriend's bed. Ah, Marissa, the one that got away. You return the bag to the airport with relief. It lasts until you get back to your room, where a fallen doll waits to greet you.
Don't let a suitcase full of dolls ruin your vacation. Go on a real vacation. GoRVing.com.
Now, the final little section here has to do with the original entrance themes made for the game. And if you remember, way back when, for the longtime listeners, I did an episode where I talked about some of the original themes of the WWF Attitude game that came out a few years before No Mercy. And suffice to say, some of the original entrance themes for that game were, well, they were something. Now remember, that was an Acclaimed game, and this is AKI, so it's a different team, and they went in a much different direction for the entrance themes here, which thankfully so. The thing about these themes is that they're not just custom themes for creator wrestlers, they're also used for bonus characters in the game. Now you have the first one, which is your default CAW theme. Another funk hip-hop mix there. Your record scratches, your deep bass line. Pretty standard, in line with the rest of the game, I'd say. Then you have this song, which, keep in mind, this is for Howard Finkel. I'll play this song and think of Howard Finkel. This is his theme in the game. Listen, when I hear a deep maniacal laugh at the beginning of a song, and then it transitions into this 90s breakbeat techno jam, I don't think of Howard Finkel first and foremost. He doesn't come to mind right away with this kind of music. I'm sorry. It's a very odd choice, to say the least. And then we have this song. A much more sultry affair here. You might conjure up images of an alluring model walking down the runway or doing a striptease, perhaps. Well, that was the theme for Mae Young in the game. And as much as I don't want to think about Mae Young in an alluring or sultry or stripping kind of way, I do think it fits both as a funny gag and, if you remember, Mae Young did some stripping during this whole time period there, so it does work in that sense too. So there you go. Then we have this song from Michael Cole. I don't know, it's a little bit too funky for Michael Cole, in my opinion. Especially 2000 Michael Cole with the frosted tips coming in. A little too much funk, in my view. But we do eschew the funk for this next one here. And it's for Andre the Giant. Yes, Andre was in the No Mercy game as a bonus character. Here you go. This is basically the intro music without the transition to the funk parts. This is that opening with the dun-dun, 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 dun-dun the whole way through. And it works so well for Andre because it's big and loud and doom and gloom. There's the big stomps as well with the percussion. So, yeah, if you're going to have an Andre theme in a game like this, then this is what you go for. It's pretty damn good. Now, there are two more themes I want to bring up. And there are themes that are not used by wrestlers in the game. Not really. The first one here is a song that sounds a lot like a theme from the New Generation era. See if you can guess what it is. If you guessed the Portuguese man-o-war Aldo Montoya, I'm sorry, that is incorrect. No, this is basically just the No Mercy version of the Big Daddy Cool Diesel theme. Same riff, same blues tone, even a MIDI harmonica thrown in there for good measure as well. And it's weird because Kevin Nash, obviously there are no plans to put him in this game, even as a secret bonus character. But I'll tell you who was supposed to be in this game, Big Show. Big Show was supposed to be in this game, but earlier in the year, they took him off TV to go to OVW and to lose weight. So they took Big Show out of the game too and replaced him with Stevie Richards. But Big Show's model was still in the game code somewhere. You could still access it through, I think, Game Shark or something like that. So theoretically, you could make Big Show in the game with the photo of his face. You don't have the music, but this theme here sounds a lot like the Big Show theme and has that same kind of lumbering quality to it, the da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It's not the same, of course, but it can work at a pinch. That's what I'm saying. So, yes, this is very much a Big Daddy Cool Diesel 1-for-1 here, but if need be, it could be a Big Show theme too. Which brings me to the last theme here, which, again, you'll figure out real quick who this theme song can work for. So the gong kind of gives it away. This is very much an Undertaker-sounding song with some extra funk and record scratches and thrown in for good measure. And in the game, Undertaker, he uses the Raw theme for his entrance. If you remember, this is when he had American Badass by Kid Rock as his actual theme in real life, but I guess if he can't get the rights to it for the game, they had to use the Raw theme instead. So there you go. Why they didn't use this custom theme for The Undertaker, I don't know. My best guess is that it sounded a little too similar to the Dark Side theme that, Dead Man Taker used a few years earlier, and it's not as congruent with American Badass Biker Taker. I can see that being the reason, but if you want to change Taker's theme to a more Taker-sounding song in general, here you go. They put it in the game for you, so pretty nice of them, I'd say. And, that's the music of No Mercy. There you go. I guess wrapping this whole thing up here, it's fun to look back on a time period where wrestling games, and I guess sports games in general, actually based the entire game's soundtrack around an original score. Nowadays, the norm for sports games and fighting games and wrestling games, it's licensed music. You put on WWE 2K or Madden or whatever, and you'll hear, big name artists or indie artists while you're zipping around the menus. Whereas with No Mercy and those games in that era, you don't have that. You have a man and his keyboard. You're not going to hear the Foo Fighters or Jay-Z when you boot up No Mercy. No, you're going to hear this. And you know what? We wouldn't have it any other way. Alright, well, that's going to do it for this episode of Music of the Mat. Thank you so much for listening. Of course, Music of the Mat is part of the Voices of Wrestling podcast network. You can find all the great podcasts on there at voicesofwrestling.com. Follow the show on Twitter at Music of the Mat. Follow me on Twitter at Andrew T. Rich. voicesofwrestling.com/Discord for all discussions and comments. voicesofwrestling.com/donate for any donations. Just click the big donate button beneath the name Music of the Mat. If you donate, hey, thanks so much. You're awesome. Rate, review, subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and many other places. And of course, HelloFresh.com/VOW16. Use the code VOW16 for 16 free meals across 7 boxes and 3 free gifts. I'm Andrew Rich, and I'll see you next time on Music of the Mat. Take care, guys.
Music of the Mat is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. The songs used throughout this show are property of their respective copyright holders.
What's the room again?
1240, down at the end.
Ooh, what's that?
Sammy, don't touch that. That's someone's old food.
Here we are. Do you have the key?
You have both of ours.
Oh, right. Not working.
Rub it.
Come on.
Try flipping it over.
Seriously. Why can't we go inside? I'm tired.
Give me yours.
You have mine.
All right.
What?
Please, if you
Dad,
could just...
why aren't you opening the door?
Can everyone just shut the...
Don't go there. Go on a real vacation. Go RVing. Learn more at GoRVing.com.